Okay, it's ready for the glue up. So I've got the handle scales, I cut them down the middle, and I'm going to be using the outsides because those are the flattest parts on the tang. That way I have a better, I won't have any gaps between the tang and the wood. So I've got that ready. I also cut some stainless steel pins, and what I did after that is I tested to make sure that they all fit and that everything fit perfectly. So I fully assembled it and then took it back apart just to make sure that I won't have any issues when I go for the glue up. Because if something does happen in the middle of the glue up and it's not working or if something's not attaching, it can be a really big problem. So you always want to make sure that everything is ready. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take some acetone and I'm just going to rub it on the handle just to make sure that I get everything nice and clean, that there's no greases. I also polished it up a little bit. It's at around 120. Don't want to do too much. I want to leave it lots of room to grab, but I want to make sure that there's no dirt or grime or anything in there. So yeah, I'll clean it off with some acetone, and then I'll make sure that I wipe it down and clean it really good. So otherwise that acetone, it won't stick to the epoxy. So yeah. So I got it nice and clean, and we're going to start. We're going to mix up the epoxy, and then I'm just going to go for it. So I'm using 2-part epoxy, and it's 5-minute epoxy. So let's start here. Okay, so the epoxy was a little bit, it wasn't flowing very good because it's a bit cold today in the shop, but I got it going. You want to have about, at least this epoxy works best with a 1-to-1 ratio of hardener and resin. So I'm going to mix it up good, and then I'll apply it to the tang and the handle scales. Okay, so I got it nice and mixed up. You can see how I have protective tape on the blade so I don't get any epoxy on the blade. So I'm just going to smear it on here. You make sure I get every place covered and that I have a lot in the groove there. Tricky part is up by the handle here. You have to kind of go up to where the handle is, but not too far because the epoxy is going to get squished out towards the front. So gotta be careful there. So yeah, now I have this side. I'll do this side here. Alright, so I got lots of epoxy on the tang. And I got to work quickly because this dries in 5 minutes, so I'm going to make sure I have the right handle scales, the right sides. This is going to be the inside. So, put that there, put the pins in here. Okay. Yep, double checking. You always want to double check, make sure everything's right. Because sometimes in the heat of the moment you can make silly mistakes, which really sucks, because they can be pretty important. So yeah, I've got that there. Now I'll take the other side. I'll set it down in here. Okay, I'll take a little hammer just to gently tap that last one in place. There we go. I want to tap them so that I make the pins oversized that way. I have lots of room in case they when you're grinding the blade, you can sometimes have like right at the edge. It can be annoying, so you want to make sure that you give the pins lots of room. You can also do them like undersized, and then you can clamp it in a vise, but this works for me. So now I have the tang assembled. I'm going to clamp it really tightly. You want to be careful not to clamp it so tight that you split the scales. So you got that there, but you want to make sure that it's nice and tight. And you still want a little bit of the epoxy in there. But that's the thing about grinding in that groove on the tang, is that you'll have room for the epoxy to go in, even if you do clamp it tight. That's it, and I'll get a couple more clamps, just to make sure I have everything clamped down. Alright, so I have it clamped. See, I've got quite a few clamps, but you can never have too many clamps, I've found. So I'm going to take a little bit of acetone, and I'm going to clean up the spill out along the edge here. If the epoxy comes right along where the end of the handle is, it kind of looks bad, so I want to make sure that I clean that up. And acetone dissolves epoxy, so I'll just clean that up right there. Let's see. Okay, there we go. Got that there. There we go. Okay, so we're all clamped up now. I'm going to let that set for 24 hours, and when I come back, we'll be ready for the handle grinding. Okay, so it's all glued up now. I took the clamps off. It's been about 24 hours since I glued it up, so the glue is all solid. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to go to my grinder. I'm going to grind the perimeter, get that all cleaned up because I left it pretty thick. There's quite a bit of wood around the edges of the tang. So I'm going to clean that up, I'm going to flatten the sides, and I'll grind in the contours. Once I've got that done, I just have to hand sand it. And then sharpen it and get a sheath done. So that's it. Alright, so I've got the handle ground and I shaped it. Now I just have to polish it. So I'm going to start with 220 grit sandpaper. Just going to sand the whole thing, make sure I got all the scratches out from the belt grinder. And then I'll just go up the grits. I think I'll go to at least 600 grit before oiling it. And then after that we just have to get the sheath and sharpen it. Alright, so I've got the handle sanded up to 600 grit, and then I buffed it on the buffer. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a bit of tung oil, and I'm going to put that on there just to seal it. And it'll bring out the grain a little bit more too. You can use a bunch of different oils. Some oils work best for different woods, and it kind of depends what you're going to use. So you'll have to do some research to find out what oil works best on what wood. So I've got the handle there, and just do a little bit and I'm gonna coat the whole thing, really give it a good rub, and then I will let it, then after I get the oil on it, I'm gonna take a clean paper towel and I'm just gonna wipe it down and rub it in. That way I don't have excess oil all over it. So yeah, just rub it down nicely. So you can see I've made it a lot darker, but once it dries it'll still have that light, it'll look a bit lighter, so you'll be able to see the grain a little bit more. And it's kind of hard to tell over the camera exactly what the wood looks like now, but it's good, it seals the wood, so you want to make sure you get every part of it, including the right front, in the front here. So bunch it up, make sure I get that oiled nicely. And just keep buffing it up a little bit with the cloth here. Alright. Yeah, so now I'm on the clean side. I'm just going to buff it up so that it's not gummy and that it takes off the rest of the oil that's on the surface. Because I don't want that oil sitting on there because it can make it sticky. Alright, there we go. So now it's just the sharpening. I'll do that a couple more times. Let's see if we get a good view. So it looks pretty black right there, but in real life it's you can see the grain a lot better. So yeah, it's looking good. Time to sharpen it. Okay, so I made the sheath off camera quickly. I've shown how I make sheaths in other videos, so you can see those other videos. I'll put a link in my the description if you want to see how I make sheaths. This is just out of Kydex, and now all that we have to do is sharpen it. So I'm going to start with the 400 grit, and I'm going to set in that edge. Once I get it so that there's a burr, I'm going to go to a Trizact belt, approximately 3000 grit, and then just do a quick buff with that. That's my strop. So that's just going to take off that burr and leave a razor sharp edge. So yeah, we're going to start and give it a go. Okay, so now I have the edge brought down to where there's a bit of a burr. It's sharp now, but it's not quite as sharp as I want it to be. It'll still cut, but it's not going to be quite as effective. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go to a strop. The strop I'm using is around a 3000 grit belt, and I'm just going to, ever so lightly and quickly, I'm just going to brush across there, and that's going to take off that burr, because right now if you feel it just like this, you'll feel it's a little bit like it's kind of sticky almost. I don't know how to you describe it. You can feel it, there's a little bit of a lip where the edge is. So I'm just going to take the 3000 grit, and that'll just take off that lip from each side and leave us with a sharp finish. So I'll show you how I do that. So now the burr is gone, and we have a razor sharp edge that'll definitely shave hair. So that's it. Let me grab the sheath. That's going to be it for this knife. This is how I make my standard issue Legion. I call them the Praetorian knife. You can ask about it. I'll also put a link in the description to my Etsy shop where you can purchase these. These are personally my favorite camp knives. I use my own personal one all the time. It's a great size for pretty much anything. It's good for chopping, but it's not so big that you can't use it for whittling and stuff like that. The recurve is nice because I can whittle here. You can make feather sticks for starting fires. You can do pretty much anything. And this palm swell is good so that it doesn't come flying out of your hands. So, plus it looks nice. It's hard to tell, but there's some good pictures on my Instagram and Etsy accounts where it'll show this knife. And just the wood is, I really like the wood and the forged scale left in here, and yeah, it's a sharp looking knife and it works really good. So yeah, thanks for watching. Yeah, I'll see you next time, and let me know if you have any questions or comments. Thanks.